Did you know that St. Luke's University Health Network, based in the Lehigh Valley, Pennsylvania, has been recognized by the U.S. government as the highest performing health system in the United States for quality? You heard right. St. Luke's #1 recognition affirms our status as the top leader among the most respected healthcare providers in the nation, including Houston Methodist and the Mayo Clinic. To state it simply, if you want to receive the best care when you go to a hospital, come to St. Luke's.
The Full Court Press is on the air. Now, here's Sean Spicer.
All right, welcome back to Full Court Press. I'm your host, Sean Spicer. Good Sunday morning to you. I have an amazing guest teed up. I have him on the Sean Spicer Show from time to time, but I wanted to get him back on this show ASAP because he has a little bit of a 12-alarm fire to share with us. Brand new exclusive polling coming out from Cygnal. And I've told you guys in this past, if you watch the show, these guys are constantly rated as one of the top pollsters in the nation. Regardless of party, because they're accurate, their insights, their analysis is spot on. This time, though, I don't mean to kick off a week with negative information, but Brent Buchanan, the head of Cygnal, gives it to us straight every time. They've got their brand new monthly national voter survey out. Brent, welcome to the show. I normally am excited to break down the numbers for you, but I read ahead. I'm a little concerned about where we are. And I know you're the messenger, so I don't mean but you're telling us this national survey shows a lot of change from last month.
Yeah, there's been some shifts. They have been more macro political economic or environment, than they have been specific to what's going to happen in the race for Congress. But definitely some warning bells going off that we need to be paying attention to, and that Republicans who are currently in Congress and in the White House need to probably make some course adjustments before the macro environment hits the micro.
So in other words, this is going to the doctor and hearing, hey, you're not dead yet, but there are some lifestyle changes you need to make, right?
Yeah, you got to quit drinking. We got to cut back on the steaks.
Okay. All right. Well, I may let's get to our polling thing. Where is the generic ballot? That's asking when you guys ask this question, would you rather have a Republican or Democrat represent you? Where is that now, and how has that shifted?
So it has barely shifted. Last month, we had a Democrat lead of 5.5. For some context, about this point in 2018, which was not a great midterm year for Republicans. It was Trump's first midterm in office. It was at Democrat +7, and it ended up at Democrat +9, and Democrats won a lot of seats and took over Congress, and we got Speaker Nancy Pelosi out of that deal.
So we're not there yet.
Right. 5.5 last month, 6.1 this month. So, it is creeping in the wrong direction after having been relatively stable prior to March. The Iran war has taken a toll on how people feel about where the country is headed and how they feel about Trump, and it's leaking into this generic ballot.
Okay. The big additional question beyond that you guys always ask is what do you think the direction of the country is going? So lay out the question. Where are we now on that? And how has it changed?
So the way we ask that question is, generally, would you say things in the United States are headed in the right direction or off on the wrong track? Now, this has not been in positive territory since I've been a pollster. So we have to keep that in mind, too, that this is not an indicator where if it's upside down, whoever's in charge definitely loses. It's really more about the direction and the delta between wrong track and right direction. And this month, we're now at 60% wrong track, 37% right direction. Back in March, before the Iran war started, that was at 55-43. So a whole lot closer. I mean, that's what, a net 13% difference. And now we're at a net 23% difference. And one of the biggest changes that we saw on that question is that people who say that they are strongly Republican dropped a net of 24 points negative in the country direction. So they were plus 85, big super happy about the direction of the country, all the way down to plus 61, which is positive. But we have to keep in mind that this is the base. So the base is starting to believe in just one single month very quickly. I think it's a combination of Iran and inflation, and inflation because of Iran, that we're even seeing the hardest core voters not feel that the country's headed in the right direction. But those voters are still telling us, I'm literally 100% going to vote for the Republican candidate for Congress.
But Jimmy, I just want to make sure I'm hearing this. Brent Buchanan, I want to make sure I'm actually hearing this correctly. So last month, 85% of Republicans who consider them strong, hardcore Republicans, the kind of folks that go out there and vote, 85% said, I think the country's kind of going in the wrong direction. I mean, the right direction. I feel good about everything. But now it's 61, meaning about 25% of less Republicans share that view now in 1 month, in 30 days.
Well, so it's net. It's subtracting wrong track from right direction. So we always try to look at the nets over time because it's easier to compare. But there's been a large drop-off among these strong Republicans on direction of the country.
So, and these are the folks that if you're running in a midterm election, these are your base voters, right?
Yep. And they're Trump.
And what? Jeez. Oh my God. All right. And then what do they think about Trump favorability wise? Are they still that not just the country, but are they still on board with Donald Trump as president?
That's a good question. Let me actually pull that data point up real quick here. So they're still holding strong at 94% favorable of Trump, which is, and they haven't increased at all in unfavorability of Trump. So it's really more, I look at this as a funnel, and how people view the country as the top of the funnel, how they view Donald Trump as the next step of the funnel, how they view the two parties is the third rung and is getting smaller. And then it goes all the way down at the bottom of the funnel to who you're going to vote for Congress, the Republican or the Democrat.
All right, but they're still with Trump, though. They're like, hey, Things might be going great, but I'm still sticking with my guy.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And they're sticking with Republicans on the ballot. But it is a warning sign when you see that much of a degradation at the top of the funnel.
Okay.
That it can work its way down.
So what is driving that then? What is the consternation that voters are is it just Iran, or what is the issue that you guys seeing the most that is really top of mind for voters?
Well, it's inflation, and it's grown pretty drastically in the last few months, even among these strong Republicans. So going back to the beginning of the year to now, it's almost a 10-point increase in concern among the hardest core Republicans about the direction of the country. And overall voters, so all voters, it's gone in March from 19% to 26%. That's a really large increase. However, it is a lot of that concern about inflation is driven by strong Democrats and left-leaning independents. And that group already hates Trump, and they're already energized to go vote. So that's why I say there are warning signs, but not the five-alarm fire right here. We just need to get the fire trucks ready for this, and we're going to have to take a little bit different tact in how we're talking to voters and what we're talking about and the tone we're talking to them in, because we're still 5.5 months away from the election, which is a political eternity. And I will use that phrase, political eternity, probably all the way out until 3 months before the election, because just so much changes, and the people who decide elections really don't tune in until the final 2 months anyways.
So that's when you think, I always say Memorial Day, that's when people start, the very beginning of tuning in. You think we've got until, if I do my math correct, basically late August? Is that where's your window where you start saying that, hey, get those fire trucks really fired, revved up?
School going back in, because a lot of the base that's going to decide the election, not the bases, but the people who are going to decide the elections are between the age of 30 and 54. They are parents. They are folks in the formative, on the younger end of that, in the formative parts of their career. They're the people who want to be buying homes and aren't able to right now. So those people will tune in once their kids go back to school depending on if you're in the South, early August, to the North, late August, early September. That really is the time frame by which, if we don't have gas, closer to $3 to $3.50 a gallon, preferably $3, and if all these fuel costs have not been able to drop the price, because nobody believes that we're going to deflate. I do focus groups all the time, and when people bring up inflation, nobody says, I want a steak to go back to $4 a steak. They believe that they know that's not going to happen. What they want is the increase to stop. And so if all of this falls into place to where Iran war is over, energy production is increased, and it's had enough time to work through the system to where people are like, oh, okay, well, actually saw a slight decrease in the price of beef. And then that maintains, that will buy us a lot of goodwill as Republicans going into this midterm. But the inverse is true, that if we don't, it will be challenging going into the midterm.
So what they really want is stability.
They want stability. They want to know what the plan is. I can't tell you how many times, and again, I bring up focus groups because I do so many of them across the country, and getting to hear from real, regular people about how they're feeling on this and what impact it's having. They just want to know what the plan is, and they will give a lot more rope. They will give a lot more grace to Republicans if we would just lay out, here is the plan.
Yeah. Obviously, Brent, when you guys look, you're not just looking at, elections are about two sides. You got the Republican side, you got the Democratic side. What is the contrast between how Republicans are viewed versus how Democrats are viewed currently?
So we ask Democrats in Congress and Republicans in Congress specifically, just because we want to bias it for that reason. Because when somebody goes to vote for Congress, they're going to vote for one of those two parties for Congress. Okay. And so right now we have Democrats at 53% unfavorable and Republicans at 55% unfavorable. So not a huge difference on unfavorability there. The problem is that Democrats are 42% favorable and Republicans are 39% favorable. So again, talking back to nets, Democrats are net less unfavorable. Republicans are net more unfavorable. And the problem has really been the trend of that. And what we've noticed in the last couple months, kind of going back to March is when the Iran war started, that Democrats have, picked up about a net 6 points on less unfavorable towards them. And Republicans have stayed about the same at negative 17 unfavorable. So, and going back to the generic ballot of you want the Republican or the Democrat for Congress, Democrats have been for the last few months hovering between 49 and 48.5%. So this drop in the generic ballot is actually people who were voting for Republican going to undecided, which means they're still gettable to bring back into the camp. They're not moving to Democrats, but as we always like to triangulate data, one data point doesn't tell a story, but three against each other do. So when we look at this increase in Democrats' image among voters, it's laying the groundwork for where some of those people who went Republican to undecided might go undecided to Democrat. And that's why it's important to get out there, be playing offense, have the plan, contrast against, this is what voting for a Democrat gets you, this is what voting for a Republican gets you. Because right now, voters are really thinking about this in terms of Trump or not Trump.
Interesting, because I was talking about this. I do this live political show on weekdays called The Huddle. And I was texting you earlier, we're going to talk about some of your polling. And one of the listeners in our sort of post-game Zoom call that we have on Fridays asked me, what do you think Republican candidates should do? And so I'll pose this to you as the guy with the data and the answers at Cygnal Polling here, which is, I think there's three buckets. Bucket one is, here's what I did for you, right? So if you're a Republican, you're talking about the big, beautiful bill, no tax on tips, all that kind of stuff. Two is you're saying, by the way, the other choice, the Democrats, here's the nutty, crazy stuff they'll do to you. They'll open the borders back up. They'll pack the court. They'll raise your taxes. But then three, that they've also got to add in a mixture of, and here's what I will do for you. So that's my analysis. What is yours? If Republicans in Congress say to you, Brent Buchanan, you guys at Cygnal Polling have gone through all this, like what do we need to do? What do you give them as an answer?
That's very similar to the three buckets I would give, but I would prioritize them in that order also. The least important thing is what I have done, because voters expect to have voted for you to do something for them. So you can't solely run on here's what I've done, especially when you see these numbers on economic approval and direction of the country going the wrong direction. You can't say here's what I've done, because they're like, well, I don't necessarily know if I want more of that. Which is why you have to say what you're going to do next and paint the optimistic future. But if we remember back to the 24 election, every single thing was contrast. Kamala Harris is for they, them, Trump is for you, was the contrast. And we were not at a national crisis of transgender surgeries for prisoners paid by taxpayers. Yet that is exactly what the number one ad spent money on was in the presidential race. So I also think that some of the things that are going to be those contrasts are not really in the conversation yet. And I'm really excited for my buddy James Blair, who was Deputy Chief of Staff of the White House, who's now going to go run the outside campaign for Trump and all those efforts, because he knows how to play hardball. He knows how to contrast. And that's going to be really important, because currently the contrast is, do I want what Trump and the Republicans are doing, or do I not? And we lose in that contrast.
I agree. Yeah, that's interesting, because I try to tell people all the time, like, you pocket these wins. Hey, the border's secure. Okay, what are you doing for me now? Crime is down. What are you doing for me now? You passed no tax and tips. What are you doing for me now? And Republicans can't just rest on what I did, but they've got to come up with an agenda of what I'll do for you.
Yeah, exactly. But we also have to talk to our low propensity voters, which means the folks who don't consistently show up in elections, particularly midterm elections. And what I see in the data for those folks is they are still very concerned about illegal immigration as an issue and the threat that it poses. So it really creates this kind of two-track campaign that you have to run, which is, what are we saying and doing to reach the people who would vote for us if they showed up to vote? What do they care about? What threats do they see? How do we raise those threats up? Because, my book, America's Emotional Divide, tells us that scientific research shows anger is the number one motivator for turnout. The Democrats are pissed off at Trump, and they're turning out to vote against him. And they'll vote against every Republican because they hate Trump so much. So how do we create that same anger on our side? What are those issues that fire our people up? And then the persuasion piece, which is the plan. What's the plan for what's next? How radically insane are Democrats? We did a battery of questions in the survey this month saying, how much do you trust each of these economic systems to deliver the best outcome for the most amount of Americans? So we said free market, capitalism, socialism, communism. Those were the four options. Everybody had to rate each of those. 61% of strong Democrats said that socialism will produce the best outcomes for the most amount of Americans. That's what we're running against, and that's the contrast that has to be made.
Okay. One of the things that stood out to me in this deck that you guys put out, and people, if people want to get, by the way, just before I forget this, if they want to see the national polling that you guys do, this deck, and where do you want them to go?
Great question. So our website is cygn.al. No comms, no nets, just cygn.al. And every month we post not just our data, but here's our analysis. And it's a deep analysis. It is like, oh yeah, pages and pages of analysis of what is happening, why is it happening, what needs to be done from here. So if you're a political nerd or just intrigued by what's going on and why it's going on, every month we're, about a little before the middle of the month, we're posting this data.
Yeah. So for those of you listening, I know most people spell Signal with a S, but this is Signal with a C, Cygnal. So I just want to make sure anyway, but the one thing that did stand out that I want to just end with is this, because we talk about messaging and how to get voters, but there was a line in your deck that jumped out at me and it frankly scared me. It said, trust in socialism, which is now 34%, nearly matches trust in capitalism nationally among voters 18 to 29. Socialism beats capitalism 55 to 38 among strong Democrats. Brent, this is a problem.
Yes. It is a huge problem. But we have to ask ourselves why. Because it's not just that they're Democrats or socialists. Many of them are. That's why Mamdani has, 750 candidates recruited for the Democratic Socialists of America. I hope to God every one of them wins their Democrat primary and loses in the general. But why do those people feel that way? I think there's two reasons. One, our K through 12 schools and our universities have been taken over by progressives and socialists, and Republicans let it happen over the last 50 years. And so now kids who go into that come out one of those, socialists or communists. But two, the capitalistic system isn't working for a large number of people. And so we have to be honest with ourselves and say, what needs to be done to ensure that this system that has made America the most prosperous country on earth of all time continue to do that another 250 years and not fall into the trap that a lot of countries fall into in their couple hundreds of years history, first part of their history.
Okay. Brent Buchanan, Cygnal Polling, again, it's CYGNAL. Their national monthly voter polling update is phenomenal. A lot of great information on there if you have more information. Brent, thanks for joining us Sunday. Thanks for being with us. Guys, we will be right back. I'm going to give you an update on redistricting. You're listening to Full Court Press with Sean Spicer on WABC.
This is Full Court Press with Sean Spicer on 77 WABC.